government's rightful purpose is to,
preserve and protect.
Preserve justice and to cause, or to I guess the word, injustices to, I can't get it out. But, just to keep the people who are using their faculties to use the resources to make products, to make a civil society, and the whole law system is created to protect the rights of private property. This extension of private property is the purpose. So you don't want these people who are using their God-given life and the resources that we have, as you were saying, stewardship. You want to make sure that there's no injustice done to these people so that they can flourish and their money system doesn't get corrupted like ours. You know what
Absolutely.
I'm saying? So, the bringing up the money system, and the whole reason I talked about the purpose of the Constitution and talked about liberty, well, the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, folks. This is what...
This is... how does it go? The 13th Amendment freed the slaves, and the 14th Amendment enslaved us all.
And this is what it says, folks, because you're not free to do something here, and we haven't even defined freedom fully yet. But anyway, the validity of public debt of the United States, authorized by law, including debts incurred for payment of pensions and bounties for services in suppressing insurrection or rebellion, shall not be questioned. And it goes on, but I'll just end there. As Chief Footnote always says, you cannot question the debt of the United States. You are not free to do that. You are a slave because who's going to pay it? You and your descendants. Well, your posterity. Yes. It's time to stop, bitch, and start a revolution right here on Food for Thought, folks.
Do we experience economic freedom? Unfortunately, not in any way, shape, or form. What was it you were saying? Enemies of freedom was something about how those who have a monopoly on something while others cannot. Now, in the case of our Federal Reserve, it's been,
What was I saying?
Something about how there are those that have the privilege to do something while the others do not.
Well, that's legal plunder.
Right, okay, yep.
And by the use of laws. Oh yeah.
Right, and what the Federal Reserve is
a
private bank.
I got something to whip out. I got it right here between my legs, folks, as we talk about legal plunder. Here it comes, right here on TV. Don't do it.
Yes, that's right, folks. Remember this? How many remember this from history class? Don't tread on me.
It means don't tread on us. D.O.F, man. Prayer and fasting in action, people. That's right. Now let me put that back down where it belongs.
Hey, right next to the next closest thing, because what was it when you testify in the days of Jesus say before the Sanhedrin?
Oh, yeah.
You put your hands over your testicles, because if you lied, that's what you'd lose.
Oh, yeah.
And then, so it's a type of eugenics too, because then I suppose you wouldn't have future generations of born liars.
That's fact there, see. Well, you got off and you were talking about the UN and they got an agenda for us. Once they get us sick and tired of our Constitution and Bill of Rights and they yak that out, then they've got the...
Well, because of our lack of economic freedom, we are experiencing other restraints put on our freedoms through things like the Patriot Act, laws like the Patriot Act.
Okay, well, we were talking about what freedom is not. The illusion of freedom. Are we living in the illusion of freedom, or do we understand the true nature of freedom? And now let's talk about the different freedoms. Now, you had mentioned the political freedom. Now, we got a whole list of very closely allied freedoms, concepts of freedom with civil liberties and individual rights. What are a few of those?
Oh, the freedom. And now these are all recognized by our Bill of Rights as freedoms, rights. Those two words are synonymous as far as I'm concerned. We have the right to assemble. We have the right to association.
It's not a right, it's a freedom.
Right, now a freedom means you don't have to get permission, the same concept as a right.
That's just what we're trying to drive home. It's a natural right. You don't need to go, like you say, you got to get a permit for everything. Everything's statism, collectivism. You can't do nothing.
If you wanted to have a family gathering in a state park or a public park of, say, more than 20 people, you would have to get a permit for that.
Well, I'm not too sure about that, but I know when they have the rainbow gatherings, they do have to get a permit these days.
That's a lot of people there that are kind of invading the park.
So let's get moving here. We got the freedom to bear arms. We got the freedom of education. We got the freedom of bowel movement. Movement throughout the country. What else we got, Buzz?
supposedly freedom of the press to
Yep.
a certain degree. Yup, freedom of religion, freedom of speech. Here we are.
Yes, sir.
Freedom of thought. Freedom of thought, trying to encourage that. Sexual freedom, well, we've all seen that.
Intellectual freedom, sexual freedom, you got to have it, man.
Yup. Suffrage or freedom to vote. Now, that's definitely, at this time, I unfortunately think that we are living in a state of illusionary suffrage. You know, where the voting that's taking place, I mean, like, you know, one of the most obvious was George Bush and John Kerry, both Skull and Bones members. You know, I mean, it's like looking at, you know, the other side of the coin, but it's the same coin. It's like owning two horses in the same horse in the horse race, you know. You know, we vote Democrat and Republican for well over a century now, and what's changed? Nothing. And one of the reasons why probably is because a lot of these elections has been fixed.
Now, Buzz, let me ask you a question, you know?
They're not
Because we're
free.
talking freedom, this, freedom that. You know, the word's been abused, it's been bastardized, you know, it's been like, come on, we got philosophical freedom, philosophy of freedom, we've got the politics of freedom. Which
Positive freedom, negative
we're
freedoms.
very interested in, you know. We have the freedom as a proper name. You know, people got names. We got geographical places like Freedom, California, Freedom, Maine, Freedom, New York. We got magazines called Freedom This, Freedom That. You know, we've got
Department of Freedom.
We've got everything. Freedom. We've got Freedom Records. You know, we've got albums put out by like Neil Young, Santana called Freedom. We got songs by Rage Against the Machine. We got, you know, Jimi Hendrix.
My favorite.
And Richie Havens, freedom. You know, we've got, you know, everything's freedom. Freedom this, freedom that. But come on, man, Buzz, what do you got? Give them a definition of what real freedom is. You got one? Because I got one from the 1828 edition of Webster's Dictionary.
Well, you know, the real definition of what freedom is, my first thought was Jimi Hendrix. If 6 was 9, my time, when it's time for me to die, it's time for me to die. So let me live my life the way I want to. You know, that's a pretty basic statement.
So in other words, if I want to come over and plunder your house and rape your wife, it's all good?
Well, but then at the same time, I could pull out my 12 gauge and blow your head off then.
Right,
How's that?
Is that your response to freedom? That's what it is?
Well, no, I mean...
You have the freedom to kill, is what you're saying.
No.
Hey, here we are on Department of Freedom sharing the thoughts
Well,
of
no,
freedom.
that's irresponsible freedom.
Now, you nailed it. Now,
And that's one of the big problems.
Now, I'm glad you brought that up because responsible freedom, I've got a nice little quote here from someone I think everybody knows. That's right. Once I can find it here, so maybe I won't find it, but here. Oh, no, I can't find it.
Anyways, well, you know, part of the other part is, you know, what is freedom to me means that I am not going to be impeded upon. You're restricted. That if I so choose to do something, I don't have to go get permission to do it within the confines of responsible citizenship.
Yep.
You know, this is the thing, too, that we've talked about many times, stewardship. You know, in our heraldry, we have shown poor stewardship in our heraldry because we don't recognize where we come from,
right. Well, if people
and we don't bring those traditions
and values. If you don't look into your past, you're not going to care about your future, and that's how most people are. As we've been studying freedom, we know it. The people just want to be safe. They don't really care about freedom. All right, but let me just go on and say something here. The 1828 edition of Webster's Dictionary says this about freedom, Buzz. It says it's a state of exemption from the power or control of another. Liberty. Exemption from slavery, servitude, or confinement. Freedom is personal, civil, political, and religious. You know? And one of my favorite quotes, man, I turned it into a tune some time ago. And it says this. It's like, seek freedom, people. Seek freedom while freedom can be found. Seek freedom, not the temporal one or the temporary one that is found through the casting down of the restraints of responsibility. No, people, indeed. Seek freedom through the carrying out of justice. And let me tell you something. It's real hard work. You ain't going to get a job working for justice, and no one's paying, so guess what? You're screwed. You know, and this is the bottom line. But I would tell you this. Bob Dylan said this, and I'm glad to say it. He said, a hero is someone who understands the responsibility that comes with his freedom. Because without responsibility, it's like a river that doesn't have riverbanks. And if you're a river and you're flowing and then you got no riverbanks, you're just a flood and you're worthless. And I got to tell you, riverbanks...
Destructive.
Riverbanks keep you going where you got to go. keep it in the guidelines. It's that simple. It's the law. It's